Thanks, Glenn, and ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming along. When I look into the crowd, I see quite a few faces that were here for the football forum as well. So obviously, I reckon there's a few in the same seat, so for some reason. But I'm going to do two presentations tonight. One, as part of the AGM, I want to go through the financial results of 2019. As Glenn mentioned, those results were announced in December last year. So I just want to go through a summary, a bit of a reminder of the key drivers of that financial result. Following that, it's nearly like that is a closure of the season. And I want to spend a bit of time with this group here and the Melbourne supporters that have taken the time to view tonight's presentations online to talk a little bit about the vision of this club and what are our goals over the next 4 years as well, and I'd be interested in your input on that. So as we start, when we look at the financial results, we've got the P&L up on the screen there. We've been through a lot of the key elements of these numbers prior to Christmas, but again, I just wanted to flag, as Glenn mentioned, a disappointing outcome for the club. Over $1.5 million operating loss. I think by the time the season finished, based on how the season played out, the impact that had on crowds that we saw drop off during the year, membership pretty well ground to a halt by round 5. I think we were all bracing ourselves for a pretty disappointing result, and we delivered that by the end of the year at a loss of $1.5 million. When I look at the key drivers of that, I suppose I start off with a positive. When I compare the results year on year, I think one of the most key stats of the year, which was a positive, was the growth in membership. So in a difficult year, we grew membership 10,000. Now that was probably the greatest growth of a club last season. Great sign for this club. I don't think there's any doubt when you look at where this club is going into the future and the financial resilience that we require, we're going to need to see that figure continue to grow, and we'd like to see it grow into the 50s, 60s, 70s as we continue to develop our performances on field. That was a positive increase year on year of $600,000. As previously discussed, but as a bit of a reminder, and Glenn touched on it there before, unbudgeted injury payments for players. So as a club, like all clubs, we budget for a certain amount of injuries, and our average, as you see up there, is about 83 games every year we lose players aren't available for those games due to injury, and we allow a budget for that amount of loss. As you see beside that, so in 2018, we lost about 83 games in injury losses. 2019, 179. It was an unprecedented year for this club. It was one of the, I think it was one of the top 5 most games impacted by injuries of any club since they've been keeping records. So when Glenn talks about a perfect storm, not only don't you have those players out on the field performing, and I don't have to tell you, a lot of those were our best players in our top 10, our experienced players of our leadership group, you not only lose them out on the field for 179 games, but it also costs you $700,000 in injury payments unbudgeted. Huge impact to the club. 2018 final related income, obviously we weren't close to being in the finals. Another big impact to the club when we compare the results year on year. And Glenn touched on it before. We've spent a lot of time talking about it last year. It was a great decision, good timing, good price to sell the Lee Oak gaming venue. We'll look in a minute at what that does to our balance sheet. Very positive outcome, creates a real financial resilience for this club, but you lose instantly $900K in revenue year on year. And to take such a big move while we're still developing the club's financials, you'll see in a minute when I talk about it, the board understood that to take out $900,000 out of your revenue stream straight away, that there was a chance that we would have a revenue shortfall and not have a profit. If that was the case, we'll see in a minute, that was taken into consideration for the money that was on our balance sheet that we made available in case we needed to top up at the end of the season. What I did want to touch on a little bit also is what you don't see in the P&L is some of the opportunity costs. And the opportunity costs there, as I mentioned before, while we grew membership by 10,000, that was by about round 4 or 5. Around 4 or 5 because we had such a bad start to the year. I have no doubt that we would have got to 60,000 members based on the momentum, based on the amount of contacts coming through to the club, if we could have continued to perform. So there was an opportunity cost there, and as Glenn touched on it before, the 2 big blockbuster games, the 2 big games at the start of the year that we were playing in against Richmond, Collingwood, that could generate as much as $1 million worth of income. Just happened to be the first year, while we were going through this tough on-field performance, was the first year we didn't have either of those blockbuster games as a home game. Again, another big opportunity cost for us from a financial perspective. So when I look at the questions that I get asked about our financials most often, so I just wanted to recap on that. Probably the most important one is when we sell the Lee Oak and we lose the $900,000 worth of revenue, what sort of impact does that have to our balance sheet? And to see our club net assets quite clearly in the green there, when we sell Lee Oak in 2018, we go from net assets, income-producing net assets that are invested, go from 6.2 to 13.1. As I also mentioned in 2019, if we did have a revenue shortfall, we were planning to take that out of the income generated for the sale, because that was a big contributing factor to the outcome. So you see we dropped back in 2019 to 11.1, which is why we were able to announce a significant loss without an increase to our debt. And again, that's a promise been made by the board that we're going to eliminate that debt, not add to it. So one of the other conversations that I've spoken to quite a few of you about as well is, what does our debt look like? And this year, as you see, from 2018 to 2019, we paid down another $600, as we announced in December. So now we're down to $2 million, and you'll see in a minute when I do present what are our goals as a club, we have no doubt that out of our profits over the next 4 years, we'll eliminate that debt and we'll be debt-free for the first time in a long time. And I think that's a significant part of us creating the club that we want everyone to be proud of, creating the best version of the Melbourne Football Club, and we want that to be debt-free. So I wanted to just give you a bit of a summary again. All these numbers, there's nothing new in it. They're all figures that we went over in December, but at the same time, just wanted a quick reminder of that. As I said, I'd also like to take the opportunity while everyone's here, and again, I know we have a lot of people that view this meeting and the presentations online afterwards, and as Glenn mentioned, on behalf of the board and the executive that were involved in putting together the vision, the strategic plans and our goals, what is our purpose, our values, what are our ambitions for that next period of time, we would like to think that everyone sees that we're all in that together. Let's face it, we went through with a tough year last year. We've been arguably going through a very tough period of time for quite some time, and I'm constantly reminded of that by supporters and members. So there couldn't be a better time for us as a club to go from a transparent point of view. While we might talk about these things, talk about it to the inner sanctums, to the coterie groups, we talk about it internally, now's an appropriate time to put this online. So by the time we get out of the meeting tonight, this will be online for all Melbourne supporters. And we do that knowing that by putting this online, by making this public, by being transparent, that we'll also come under attack. And there'll be a certain percentage, hopefully, of Melbourne members that look at it and go, I love the clarity. I love to know what the club's doing and what their ambitions are. There'll be plenty of people that actually look at what I'm about to present to you and say, we're nothing like that. we'll never be able to achieve that. And I reinforce that when we paint a vision, a picture of what we want to create as a club, we're not saying that's what we are now. What we are saying is this is why we roll up every day. This is why we get these players to go out and perform the way they do. This is all the board's decisions are about, creating the vision of the club that we want this club to be. So to give it a bit of a context before I rip into it, when we talk about the vision a little bit later on, we're going to be talking about, in a lot of cases, we're going to be talking about the demon spirit. And there seems to be, as we put this together and we chatted to a lot of people, a lot of Melbourne supporters, I've got to say that was the feel, and that was in the conversations and the feedback that just continually come up about this great club. And for those supporters, I've got to say there could be a few in the room, there were supporters prior to 1964 that were there, that saw the premierships, to see Melbourne as the dominant powerhouse club, that remember what it was like, the demon spirit playing at the MCG in front of the 50, 60, 70, 80, 90,000 people. Still hold the record crowd, Melbourne Footy Club, of playing in front of 115,000 people. This is a club that's 162 years old. The inaugural club that wrote the rules. We're a dominant club, if not the most dominant club, for the first 110 years. And this was a strong club, a club that had this magnificent demon spirit that the supporters that have been around for a long time love to talk about. So we're not trying to recreate something that's not part of this club. That's in our DNA. And for those that have been involved in the club in more recent times, yes, in chatting to them, there's plenty of disappointments, there's plenty of frustrations, there's quite often a bit of scar tissue with everyone about certain circumstances, and quite often supporters were keen to tell me about that. But they also loved going back to those times when we looked and felt our best as well. Even as recently as 2018, where many of you in this room would have been out there on the MCG, playing in front of 80, 90,000, where Melbourne and the red and blue were 80% of the crowd. That's how quickly the demon spirit can come back to this club. And we also acknowledge from a lot of that feedback that the last 55 years, we also hold the title of the longest premiership drought. And that affects the dynamics of the club, and we respect that. And that's where To Hell and Back comes from. Because To Hell and Back and the work that we're doing now is not to be back as in we're going to win the first game. It's not even about being back, we want to play in the finals again. To be back to the great club, the powerhouse club, the best version of the Melbourne Football Club, and to reignite that demon spirit. That's what the vision of this club. When we're back, so I'm not talking 10 days or 10 weeks, I'm saying that's the sort of journey that we have planned for the next 10 years to reignite that demon spirit. And so that's what we're talking about here. So, up on the screen, Glenn touched on it before. A starting point, I think it's really important that we articulate and put on the website, this is our purpose, this is why we exist. To be a club where our people feel proud to belong. And I think at times we've really lost momentum in that space. You just think about emotionally where you've been at different times. What that looks like when our people feel proud to belong is they love putting on the demon colours. They love coming to the games. They must be a member. They must sign up. They want their membership card. They want to sing the song. They want to be part of the club. They make sure all their family are members like them, and they don't make excuses. This is about our players, our coaches, our staff, supporters, members, all feeling proud to belong. And I think in a lot of ways, especially after last year, we've still got a lot of work to be done here. But as Glenn mentioned, every decision that we've been making over the last 12 months is about, if we did this, would this make our people, our players, our coaches, our supporters and members proud to be part of this club? When we look at setting our ambitions on field, It's exactly the same thing. So, our purpose, why we exist, to be a club where our people feel proud to belong. Glenn's already covered off the values. I won't be, and he articulated that beautifully. But there's the values. And every person within the club has behaviours that live those values in all aspects. So in our language, the behaviours we reward, the behaviours we hold ourselves accountable to,